Hello, Brobs. We're back with Salem's Children by Mary Leader. A heritage of horror rises, stalks, kills. It's a 1979 thriller, which is about witchcraft, but it's not really about witchcraft. There's instances of witchcraft that it mentions Salem, but if you're looking for like witch action, you ain't getting in here. Chapter 22. Greg and I stood on the bluff, gazing out over the Christmas landscape. Above us in the midnight sky, the blizzard of stars was transcendent. Over the bejeweled village, where reds, greens, blues, and ambers in the outdoor lighting made rainbows in the snow. To somber, to somber Puritan Salem, Peacehaven would have been a bedizened Jezebel. Or is it bedizened? Bedizened Jezebel? I don't know. Windows, usually dark at this hour, glowed with Christmas trees and candles. Carols flowed from a loudspeaker, and far in the distance, a pair of snowmobiles outlined the opposite shorelines of the river with their darting beams. It was a fragile moment, suspended in the night like a spun glass ornament dangling from the tip of a branch. Perfect, yet only a tremor away from disaster. I cradled the moment in my mind, hardly daring to breathe. I didn't want to remember. I wanted only the now, but Caper's bell against the gate fractured it and brought the horror of Lucy's seizure less than an hour before to mind. Damon had administered a sedative while Lucian ended the service with a hasty benediction. I had expected the scheduled festivities to be canceled, but Elspeth insisted that the party she was giving the girls proceed as planned. Greg, after putting his mid-holiday issue to bed, met me at the church and brought me home. As I stepped out of his VW, the spell of the crystal night momentarily made me forget. Now, seeing Caper had brought it all back. I'm going to let this smelly, obscene symbol of the devil out for a frolic, I said wryly, opening the gate. Caper catapulted through, rolled over, and, leaping high in the air, came up with a hunk of snow on his nose and began to race around the yard like a frustrated impala. Look at him, Greg. How could Lucian say such things? No sooner had I said it than the little goat circled and struck Greg from the rear, pancaking him down into the snow. As I reached to give Greg a hand, my foot slipped and I fell into his arms, our lips brushing through a cloud of snow vapor. He may be an imp of Satan, Greg murmured, but he maneuvers like an artist. He wiped the snow from my face. What's wrong, Mitty? You're so quiet all of a sudden. Nothing. Let's go in. Help me decorate the tree, and I will pay you in Tom and Jerry's. I looked back at the little goat, standing alone and dejected in his pen. Capricorn, I mused. A great goat. A goat could symbolize Christ as well as the devil. That's a switch. But if Jesus really was born on December 25th, I laid my mitten against his mouth. Oh, I know. Scholars dispute that, but what do they know? It would be logical for Christ to be a Capricorn, the scapegoat who takes away our sins. You really mix 'em up, astrology and Christian symbolism, he said, opening the door for me. It's been done before. Remember the Magi? Where's Carriot? He asked when I came into the living room with the steaming hot drinks. She's over at Dana's. Come down and have this while it's hot. As I savored the frothy liquid, he sat stirring his thoughtfully. I hope Lucy's fit won't make people reluctant to go on with the pageant, he remarked. The pageant, always his blasted pageant. I don't know, Greg. I have reservations about reviving the trauma of 1692. One or two performances, that would be one thing, but day after day, night after night, I wonder what effect it will have on the girls or the others. An angry flush crept into his cheeks. You didn't see the whole thing tonight, I hurried on. It was as if one of those scenes had come to life. Those were real burns. I saw fluid oozing from those blisters. Stigmata are a form of hysteria, he protested. The girls in Salem village showed similar symptoms. The wounds disappeared as quickly as they came. Even so, I worry about Lucy. She's such a sensitive, suggestible child. He set down his drink and began rummaging in a box of ornaments. If it's the pageant, then I suppose I'm guilty too, he said, attaching a hook to a red satin ball. Perhaps we all are. How about a refill? I asked. Not now, thank you. Where's the tinsel? There isn't any. I don't like my ornaments to be covered up by ropes of tinsel. No tinsel, he mused disappointedly. What's Christmas without tinsel? You're a terrible Puritan, I chided him. How corrupted you are wanting tinsel. Though, honestly, Greg, I pursued my thought, I have reservations about the pageant. You don't like the script? He asked quietly. No, it's a great script, but it's digging up grievances that belong to the past, and it may be releasing things. I shuddered, remembering the burns crawling across Lucy's skin. His finger lifted my chin. You sound fresh out of Salem. Maybe that wasn't as far out as he thought it was. My mind raced back over the months I'd been in Peacehaven. The phone calls, the poppet, my dreams, Rowan, now Lucy. I'm beginning to understand those people, I said. We may be more advanced in science, but we don't know any more about what lies beyond. Greed and spite were elements in the Salem tragedy, but honest fear was the catalyst. Frightened people are dangerous people, and I shudder to think what we might do given similar circumstances. That's why I'm not sure we should continue rehearsals. But you know theater better than any of us. If you pull out, there may not be any pageant, he protested, mounting the ladder. Would that be so bad? I regretted saying this instantly. I was killing his dream. If it's Lucy you're worrying about, blame her father, not the pageant. Lucian does have a strange effect on people, I conceded, handing him a tiny drummer boy. Remember how he suddenly appeared when Rowan had her seizure, and how his prayer did more to inflame than calm when the mob came after Quentin? The talk is you've been seeing a lot of him. He comes up here with Lucy. Rowan enjoys them. And you? It's better than lonesome evenings, I shot back. The shaft went home. I've been busy revising the last act, he explained. If you desert us now, Mitty, Iris would have to take over. That brought me around. All right, Greg, I yielded. Come on, let's get this tree done before New Year's Eve. Boy, it's hot up here, he complained as he leaned over to put the drummer boy in place. Watch out, the ladder's tipping. He pulled back, but lost his footing and slid among the teetering ladder to the floor. Damn, he pushed up his shirt sleeve. Did you hurt yourself? It's nothing, just a sliver from the ladder. Well, I have a degree in splinter removal. Wait here. I returned with needle and tweezers. The sliver was lodged in his forearm near the inside of his elbow, in quite deep and broken off below the skin. As the sharp point touched him, he jerked back. I've a terror of needles. That's a common male syndrome. I'm going to have to hurt you some, but I'll be as gentle as possible. He lay back against the arm of the sofa, his eyes closed. I slipped the needle in under the top layer of skin and exposed the tip of the splinter. After I'd lifted the end free, I latched onto it with the tweezers. There you are. I held it up for him to see, but he didn't respond. Just sat there rigid, staring at me wildly. By my faith, 'tis witchcraft. Through white lips thou hast put the mark o' the devil upon me, and I love thee, Mary. The tweezers dropped from my hand. This time he had slipped through to the other side. At my touch, he sprang away from me. Get thee gone, harlot, get thee gone. Then the glaze over his eyes faded. He looked around, clearly bewildered. What happened? You weren't yourself just now, Greg. I don't know what you mean, he said, fastening his cuff. It's always happened to me before. This is the first time. Well, not quite, I said, remembering the cave, that had happened to you. You better sit down. He didn't believe me and brushed it aside. You know, Mitty, it's not the girls we need worry about. You're the one who's letting the pageant get to you. Naturally, you dream about it. I know I do, and dreams never make sense. I'm flattered. I'd no idea my writing was so effective. He took a spun glass bauble shaped like a minaret and hung it on the tree. See how it catches the firelight? I exclaimed, feeling an exquisite shiver as his hand suddenly framed my face. I prefer the firelight in your eyes. Oh, how cute, he said softly. I almost wish your dreams about Mary Esty and William Stoughton were reality. I'd write it into the pageant for you and me to act out. Why act? Reality is here, Greg. Oh, yes, he breathed into my hair. I never dreamed that reality could be perfection. I'm afraid to reach for it. For fear of shattering it, oh, Mitty, we sank down into the cushioned abyss of the sofa. Merry Christmas. Rowan stood over us accusingly, her eyes gleaming, her mouth drawn down into a thin arc. Merry Christmas to you, sweetheart. Was the party fun? No, it was a drag, so Iris took me over to her house to listen to some new records. See what she gave me for Christmas? She thrust a pair of Levi's that were gaudily decorated with silver studs into my hands, and I seethed internally. Iris, always Iris. Rowan, you must always let me know where you are. Oh, mother, she's an adult, and she didn't want to give me such a nice gift in front of the other girls. You know what? We went skinny dipping in her basement. The water's heated. I fought to approach this with care, as I would someone standing at the edge of a precipice. You know how susceptible the cold you are. We'll discuss this later. Have you heard how Lucy is? Oh, she's okay. Lucian called and said her burns were gone. See? Greg said triumphantly. Sheer hysteria. Rowan gave him a who asked you look. Did I interrupt something? She asked. She knew damn well she had. Not at all, sweetheart, I lied. I'll heat up the Tom and Jerry's, and since this is Christmas Eve, you may have one. Okay, be back in a minute. She was standing by the fireplace holding a small dark book when I returned with the drinks. Here's a Christmas present for you, she said. I found it up in the tower. Isn't that my grandmother's name on it? That must be one of the ones I shipped to Aunt Bo when your grandmother died. She opened a page near the beginning of the book. Here, read this, she said, handing it to me aloud. Widow Judith, I began, was a sister of Israel Stoughton, married in England, John Denman about 1620, and he died. She married a Smede about 1634. After the death of her husband, she came with her son William, born in England in 1635, to be with her brother in Dorchester. His son, William Stow. Go on, she demanded. William Stoughton became lieutenant governor and then acting governor of the colony and was for years Chief Justice. I had never read this book, I exclaimed to Greg, who had gone to the window and was standing with his back to us. I never knew Stoughton was. Rowan slouched down onto the sofa and put her feet up on the coffee table, her hands behind her head. You're descended from his aunt Judith. I traced it down. Oh, well, that's pretty distant, I pointed out. But you're still a Stoughton, Greg muttered, wheeling around. No wonder you've defended Stoughton all along. And you cooked up a tale about him and Mary Esty being lovers. Even tried to tell me I was once. to tell me I was once. Greg, please, I didn't know what was in the book, that book. Oh, surely your mother would have talked about the ancestor who was, with sarcasm, His Excellency, Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. Genealogy buffs thrive on titles, so you're a Stoughton. That's why you're trying to scuttle the pageant. Have I done something wrong? Her eyes were sapphire innocence. Not at all, Rowan, he assured her. It's time we cleared the decks. Aunt Judith, dear Aunt Judith, oh, I can tell you about her. She and her first husband were plaintiffs in a famous lawsuit against the family of witches in Devonshire. No doubt she instructed William Stoughton in his bigotry when she lived in his house. And who instructed you in yours? I flared. If only you'd told me at the beginning, I might have understood, but with a sudden movement of his arm, he dislodged the minaret, which shattered at his feet. He knelt down and started to pick up the fragments. I'm sorry, Mitty, I shouldn't have lost my temper. What does all this have to do with us? I turned toward the fire. I think it has a very great deal to do with us, I said. You think I'm a liar. I find I'm very tired, Greg. Don't bother to pick up the pieces. You've broken it, and you can't put it back together again. I'm going to bed. Good night, Greg. Rowan smiled in the shadows as the door closed behind him. And you can wipe that smirk off your face, I snapped. If I'm descended from him, you are too. No, I'm a Llewellyn, not a Stoughton. I want no part of your family, mother. An anguished cry sounded from the backyard. As I switched on the yard lights, I saw Dana and Greg crouching over something in Caper's pen. I ran toward them, heedless that I wore no coat and snow was crunching into my shoes. Dana turned an agonized face toward me. I heard a sound, a scream, she quavered. Almost human it was, then feet running and a car driving off. She was cradling Caper's head in her arms. Someone had driven a pointed stake through his body, and his blood was making dark angels in the snow. I've forgotten who Caper is throughout this story, so I'm not really sure who the hell that is. So I'm not sure. Is that an animal? Oh, I think Caper's the goat, isn't it? All right, let's see how long this second. I'm only at 17 and a half minutes, so. Chapter 23. We'll see how long this is. No, it's a pretty long one. So, 11 pages. We can do it. We, as if you're going to help me. You greedy bastards. Chapter 23. The ancients who began the new year in March showed more perception than we for the old year is still in its death throes in January and February, while the new year is locked in the earth's womb into the spring equinox. I was never more conscious of this than in my first year in Peacehaven. January and February were to me a time of loneliness and disintegration. Greg abruptly suspended publication during that time and left town. Whether on vacation or business, no one seemed to know. More disturbing to me was the fact that Iris, too, had departed for parts unknown, and rumor had it they'd gone off together. Dana was busier than ever, and I worried about the drain on her. She had become drawn and distant. My offers to help were declined, and I knew Dana better than to insist. But I missed our old, easy companionship. Allison began to fail again after the new year. She developed a chronic cough and tired easily. Although she swore she merely caught cold, the rest of us were skeptical, especially Ward, who'd grayed visibly. On one of my visits, I caught Dana kneeling at Allison's side, her hands uplifted over the motionless woman, for whom waves of scarlet were drawn into her own chest. Hearing my gasp, Dana whirled around and faced me with eyes black and forbidding. You should not have come now, she mumbled. What are you doing? I do what I must, and you have no part in this. Allison stirred slightly, but didn't wake. If sleep it was. I stumbled out, puzzled and not a little hurt. In the ensuing weeks, neither she nor Dana ever mentioned the incident. Dr. Brune was busy charting and codifying his finds. He no longer visited the cave now that snow would betray his tracks. One day he showed me an oval wicker frame with fragments of desiccated skin still clinging to it, which he had found partly covered with rubble in a deep recess. This could be a frame for either a Welsh coracle or a Mandan bull boat, he explained excitedly. They may have used boats like this to come up the river, he sighed. This, alas, is not proof. The material and structure will have to be analyzed and dated with reasonable accuracy, and that's not going to be easy. I asked him if this time the carbon 14 test would be used. You'll remember that radiocarbon 14 works only on organic materials, things that once lived. I'm going to send skin and bone samples to the university laboratory, but they may have been contaminated by bacteria. In any case, it'll be a long time before I get an answer. Seeing my disappointment, he laid his hand on my shoulder. Patience, my dear Mitty. It Patience, my dear Mitty, is a most necessary attribute for an archaeologist, something our friends seldom develop. And now, please excuse me, I must get back to my book. And so it went. All those I loved were drifting away from me. I was so lonely I felt a stir of pleasure when I opened the door one day to see Lucy in there. Then I remembered Christmas Eve and let him stand outside with the wind and snow whipping at him until he apologized so abjectly that I relented and invited him in. I don't know what got into me that night, he said, over a cup of steaming hot tea. I was trying to illustrate how we are beset with a growing paganism all around us. Before I knew it, I burst out about Dana's goat. Her goat. Before I knew it, I burst out about Dana's goat. To me, caper was merely a symbol. I never dreamed anyone would take me literally. Start dreaming then, I said, offering him lemon. You have tremendous influence over these people. A flush of pleasure erased the distress in his face. I'm delighted you think so, Mitty. You polarized the whole town, I led him on. They tell me the church nearly fell apart under your predecessor. You've made it thrive. Now your idea to revive the pageant may benefit the entire community. Especially if Brother Carrier's and Brother Bishop's plans are implemented, he murmured, helping himself to a donut. So now I knew where he stood. The people here will do anything you ask them to, I said. He reached across the table to take my hand. I didn't know you felt that way, Mitty. But it's true. I let my finger go limp as he squeezed them. Your power over them is almost godlike. That's what you want, isn't it? Whose emissary are you, Lucian, God's or Satan's? His dark brows fused, and he pulled his hand away. What do you mean? You'd have done well in Salem, Lucian. You give us a choice between a vengeful, egotistical Christ and a wicked but heroic and fascinating Satan. That's no choice at all. He rose, trailing powdered sugar down his black coat. You've been listening to apostates, he said stiffly. My apostates don't instigate blood sacrifices, I retorted. Sit down, Lucian. All right, the train's got something to say. Let's see what he's going to say. No, I think he's done. My apostates don't instigate blood sacrifices, I retorted. Sit down, Lucian. You did brave a storm to apologize to me. I told you once how beautiful you are when you're angry, Mitty, he replied. I came to ask a favor of you. It's Lucy. She needs a woman to talk to. Besides, Mrs. Soames. What about Iris Faulkner? An edge in my tone. There's always too much of a crowd around her. Lucy needs someone more like her own mother. I was touched. She must have died very young. She's still alive. She suffered a brain injury in an accident and is in a sanatorium. Oh, I didn't know. No one does here. They think I'm a widower. Poor Gladys. His fingers crawled up my arm. You and I are much alike. We've lost our mates. We understand each other. I reached up to pull his hand away, but instead his hand caught mine and refused to let go. I hadn't thought we shared much under. I broke off. His fingernail was rasping my palm. I jerked it away. It's getting late, I said. I must get some work done on the pageant scenery. After he'd gone, I went to the kitchen and scrubbed my hand. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the tower working on thumbnail sketches of pageant scenery. As I started to lay out the gallows hill scene, I discovered my ruler was missing. Rowan must have borrowed it. Too lazy to go downstairs to look for it, I burrowed in the drawers to see if Aunt Bo might have had one. They were crammed with papers, some typewritten, others in manuscript. Someday I must go through these. Aunt Bo, I knew, had written articles for historical publications. In the last drawer, a book on Salem I'd never seen before lay on top. Several sheets of yellow copy paper had been folded and inserted into the book. I might have shoved it back into the drawer, but a note scrawled on the top of the paper caught my eye. Mitty, read this. My skin began to prickle as I unfolded the sheets with trembling hands. It was as if Aunt Bo was sending me a message from the grave, although as I scanned the blotched and X'd out typing, I realized this was a rough draft of one of her articles. Considering the widespread persecutions against witchcraft in England and Europe, the wonder is that, with the exception of a few isolated incidents, witchcraft hysteria in New England was confined to the Salem area. What triggering factor in Salem was missing elsewhere? All the colonists believed in and feared witchcraft. They all suffered privations and disease and shared a fear of Indians lurking in the forests, oppressions by the king, and the ever-present specter of early death. But Salem had Tituba, historians write. Tituba started it with her voodoo tales from Barbados. Nonsense. The colonies were full of slaves. Surely Tituba was not the only storyteller among them. No, we have to look further. I have just read with interest Salem Possessed by Paul Boyer and Stephen Nissenbaum, Harvard University Press. Boyer Nissenbaum attribute the witchcraft hysteria to already existing internal factions in Salem village society, and especially the church of which Samuel Paris was pastor. On page 184, there is a chart of the anti-Paris network in the Salem Village congregation, of which faction 18 members were accused witches and a third of those executed. On the other hand, the supporters of the witchcraft trials were overwhelmingly pro-Paris. Still, to messengers Boyer and Nissenbaum, Paris was only the final straw that broke a pre-existent camel's back. They point to long-standing rivalries and jealousies, land squabbles, and class struggles. The trouble with that hypothesis is that such conditions were in no way unique to Salem. The Reverend Samuel Paris of the Salem Village Church was unique, however, and I respectfully suggest that he may have been the missing ingredient historians have been seeking. I'm well aware that this will cause howls in history circles, but here's my argument. Samuel Paris came to the Salem Village congregation, a backwater church known for its quarrels with its ministers, not out of choice, but because he could get no better without a theological degree. He was a Harvard dropout. When he inherited property in Barbados, he moved there and established a mercantile business between the island and the colonies. 16 years later, after nothing but failure, he returned to the ministry. And considerable haggling, learned as a trader, no doubt, he negotiated an unusually favorable contract with the Salem Village Church that included his salary, increments, bonuses, provisions, and firewood. An anti Paris faction developed, and the new minister was constantly embroiled in arguments trying to make his parishioners live up to the contract. Here was the man with an anti Midas touch in all he endeavored, who was thus frustrated and bitter. Add to that the fact that there may have been a streak of insanity in his family. His son was to die a hopeless lunatic, and the conjecture that he personally took revenge on his opponents becomes entirely plausible. Now, let me digress a moment. Slavery was a fact of life in colonial Massachusetts. The colonists had brought with them an abundance of witchcraft superstitions from their homeland. It would make an interesting study, however, to assess what new dimensions had been added to their superstitions by African and West Indian beliefs. For instance, in the West Indies, there are many tales of houses being pelted by stones in supernatural origin, often quite well substantiated. Nearly identical phenomena in New England are recorded by Increase Mather in his Lithobolia. Lithobolia. Samuel Paris had lived in Barbados. Is it not probable that he observed and absorbed some of the native voodoo and Obeah religion, an overlay of Indian and African beliefs with European Christianity and Satanism? When Paris came to Salem Village, he brought two Barbadian slaves, through whom he would have had a means of communication with other slaves in the area. In his most recent frustration, this proud, egotistical man may have turned to those other unfortunates who had often good reason to hate their owners. What better vengeance than for the slaves to work their native magic on their masters and then make it seem that they were the witches? Confessing witches in the Salem trials babbled aloud, babbled about coven meetings in Paris's pasture. Now that could have meant any of several tracts of land which Paris acquired, either by purchase or gift, prior to 1692. Historians have generally dismissed these tales of occult activities in Paris's meadow as flights of fancy by neurotic women, or downright lying. Have historians overlooked an obvious clue? Is it not possible that these neurotic women were telling the truth after all? My eyes traveled to a note at the bottom of the last page, written in her shaky hand. Peacehaven has another Paris. Heaven help us. What wouldn't I have given to have Greg there at that moment? I doubted he'd seen this, for it certainly contradicted his theory. Hers seemed the better of the two to me. It took some of the onus off William Stoughton. Greg would hate that. I could see a black hooded figure conducting arcane rituals or arcane rites by firelight. Mary Esty had never guessed who he was. Ha! I knew something she hadn't. The pageant needed rewriting. That last scribble of Aunt Bo's. Strange. Just then my groping hand found a ruler in the drawer. Good. I could go back to my work. Let's see. Gallows Hill. Should I depict the sea in the background? It must surely have been high enough to afford a view of the salt marshes lining the shores, with white-crested waves shattering on the sand and gulls soaring overhead in the lowering sky, their eerie cries sounding in my ears as I ran over the expanse of sand into my old dream. And into his arms his buckled hat had blown from his dark curls and lay on the ground. He folded his cape about me, and we clung to each other in the wild, wet wind. Thou munna go, my love, I pleaded. They bring news smallpox in London. Alas, Harvard has more degrees to offer me. Sweeting, come away with me to London, Mary. Would that I could, I moaned, but with mother gone, I mun care for Barrett and Sarah, and thy brother never consent. Thou art not yet of age, and master, o thy fortune. But bide here a year until thou art, and then, God willing, I will go with thee. Nay, I cannot. The colony needs leaders. 'Tis my duty. A fine leader thou'st make if thou shouldst sicken with the pox. I fingered a tiny case in my pocket, which I had fashioned out of two scallop shells bound together. Such things are in the hands of the Almighty, he replied. Not quite, my love, I thought. He guided me over the dark sand to a salt-encrusted rock, where we would be sheltered from the wind and from sight. A ripple of flame throbbed through my body as his hand unlaced my bodice, and his fingers sought my hardened nipples. Nay, nay, I mun hold back so that unsatisfied he had lie awake nights in London dreaming of me. With a wench I rolled away from him. What ails thee, Mary? Have I offended thee? He reached for me to pull me back. Before God, we are man and wife. Nay, not yet, Will, I demurred. Then let us have this thing between us. Let us mingle. Our bloods, I finished his sentence as I relaced my bodice. I'll not be thy harlot, Will. Thy wife I'll be or naught. Holding out my mother's knife, thy blood in my veins and mine in thine. He pulled back his sleeve. I carved a small cross over the vein in his wrist, then did the same with mine. Our wrists bound together, our bloods mingling, we lay side by side, looking up at the gray sky and listening to the roar of the ocean that would soon lie between us. Stealthily, I drew the shell case from my pocket and had it ready when at last I unbound our wrists. Before he could stop me, I had daubed his wound with the smelly yellow pus. I had not more than 2 hours gone taken from sores on my sister Sarah's hands. What art thou doing? He demanded. Putting salve on thy wrists, so 'twill mend. And why not on thine? Thou hast left none for myself. I but forgot, I lied. Nay, this was sinful. To lie would forever damn my immortal soul. I munna trifle with he. Will, 'tis a remedy to keep thee safe from the smallpox, a thing I learned from my mother. With a cry of horror and disgust, he plunged his arm into the sand. By my faith, 'tis witchcraft, he swore. I've heard about thy mother, but I never believed it. Thou hast placed the mark of the devil upon me. I should kill thee here and now, but I cannot, for I love thee. I loved thee. May God have mercy on me for my weakness. I thank thee, O heavenly Father, for saving me from fornicating with this woman of Babylon. I might have reminded him that it was I, rather than God, who saved him from that particular sin, but I only cried, Struth, Will, I know no witchery but love. Thou art the devil's own. Nay, I knelt before him, winding my arm about his legs, but he pushed me roughly away, his face full of loathing. Confess, Mary, for thy soul's sake. I cannot. I dare not believe myself. Will, lest I be damned. Nay, but thou art damned. A whirlwind caught him up and spun him round and round until he was sucked through a hole in space. What? A whirlwind caught him up and spun him round and round until he was sucked through a hole in space. I don't know what that means. I stumbled after, calling, Will Stout and Greg. He was gone, but his voice trailed behind him in the echo chamber. Damned, damned, damned. Was that some paranormal shit there? I came to at the ringing of the telephone. Mitty, why haven't you listened to us? Came the whisper. We are many. Susie first, Nancy second, and then Carrion? Carrion. I spiraled down the steps to the nursery. Carrie lay on the floor, her head cradled on Macduff's shaggy flank, and Loki nestled in the lee of her elbow. If I hadn't feared I'd frightened her, I would have snatched her up and hugged her frantically. Instead, I sat down quietly on the floor beside the trio. I must take her away from here. I'd sell the Phoenix, let Damon and the others have their way. But, of course, that was it. They must be behind the phone calls. I'd be doing the very thing they wanted. With this realization came relief. Damon and Charity weren't murderers, but they mightn't be above trying to frighten me away. If so, then this was only a cheap trick with no real threat. If I left, they'd have won their point, and I would have betrayed Dana and my own principles. If I were to run now, I'd keep running the rest of my life, uprooting my children time after time whenever something went wrong. And if my dreams and visions had any truth whatsoever, our karma was bound up in Peacehaven, and no amount of running would save us. Carrie stirred and opened her liquid brown eyes. Her little arms reached out to me. I picked her up and held her tight while tiny fingernails explored my face, pattering over the bridge of my nose and down to my mouth. With a peal of laughter, she bounced out of my grasp and began running around the room, patting the baseboards. House, Carrie's house, she babbled over and over. She had made the final decision. Bam! That's the end of chapter 23, and the end of this reading, unless someone pays me $368 trillion to continue reading. Going once, going twice. That's all, mothers.